So we're talking about what it means to be future ready. Now, to me, that's quite open to interpretation. So first of all, I wanted to ask the panel, starting with you, Catherine, what you think future-ready skills look like.
Well, I think future-ready skills are very contextual. So what's future-ready for one company is not future-ready for another company. It's also not only digital skills anymore. So digital transformation is a little bit like an old concept, I feel. Most companies have to move well beyond digital skills. So skills of agility, like human skills, interpersonal skills, the soft skills, very important too. Digital skills, of course, data skills, all of these are generally important, but you won't really know what your important skills are unless you contextualize it for your industry, for your company, who you are as a company, for your talent strategy, for your culture, and for your leadership strategy. So I think it's very hard to say a broad, sweeping statement, these are the future-ready skills.
Yeah.
So I think it's a journey that every company has to go forward and get some data in on what really matters to them.
What about you, Francesco? What the future-ready skills look like at Vodafone?
No, I agree, it's contextual. I don't want to disagree with my fellow panelists.
Please disagree. Just start a fight already, 4 minutes in.
I do think that, especially in technology and in telecommunication, digital skills are still very important, and building digital skills is still one of the key things that we're trying to do. It's true that in the last few years, soft skills, what you call soft skills or leadership skills, have become more and more important. And I think the transition to hybrid working and different ways of working have made the importance of that skill even more relevant. And then, yes, you can take different type of cuts. Like you can take, like say, an industry cut, you can take an organizational cut to the type of skills you need. So when you look at our own industry, we are making a transition in many different ways. I think someone said like, it's a little bit like the banks. So we're making a transition which is a geographic transition. We're making a transition which is from being purely service to be product company. We're making a transition to be a more automated and a more, let's say, digitized in our back office. So transitioning is becoming a skill in itself. And the ability to cope with change and transition is becoming super important as well.
Okay, and Jordi, as your job title suggests, you know all about transition and transformation. Are you inclined to agree with Francesco?
Yeah, I think I echo the leadership enduring human capabilities, as we call them, category of skills. I think that those are getting more attention. On the other hand, I still see many of my clients focusing on technical skills to really illustrate those, that we need to have the technical skills in place. Yes, the human capabilities are important, but also keep on focusing on the technical, although we know, these will change. But still, the importance doesn't go away.
Absolutely. And in the bio of this talk, it talks about an advanced skill library. Is that something that you use at the Josh Bersin company?
Well, not so much for us, but we talk with probably like 40 big companies every week. And pretty much every big company is on a journey. I don't think anybody is there yet. I think you're doing some great work at Vodafone, but every company is on this transition to establish this like big skills taxonomy, skills library. But the problem is a lot of these skills libraries and taxonomies come from different places. So usually then you have one that you use for recruiting, another one you use for learning, another one you use for talent mobility, another one you use for your executives, for example, and they never speak to each other. So how are you going to get this common core into your company and manage your talent in a better way? So every company is, I think, on a journey to try to get their arms around it, but it's very challenging because if you think about skills, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Right? So in a company you could have 30,000 skills, 50,000 skills, and who could ever think about all of these? So getting your arms around that is challenging, and I think every company is trying to do this in a better way, in an easier way.
Yeah. And Francesco, can you talk about the practicalities of using this skills library and how you're implementing it?
So we do have a skill library. It's not 30,000. So the first thing we did was a huge effort to simplify and make it, like, say, shorter and easier to use. So we today have probably 103 skills
Oh, wow.
which we have mapped through the organization. It's true that there are different skill libraries coming from different places. Believe it or not, Eightfold has their own skill library, so which is a proprietary thing, which again is something that we will need to think about and think through, because what you want is more and more like one simple version of your own skill library and integrated across the different touch points. Because more and more what you see is that skills is going across both learning and recruiting. There are many opportunities in which you can make your recruiting experience much better if you put some training and skills development into it. Now, in order to do that, you need to have one skill library for that job, which goes across all of your processes, right? We did that just a quick example. We did a big effort to recruit Ukrainian refugees as we speak. And in the process, we try to integrate, let's say, the recruiting experience of the people coming through the process and the learning and some learning experience for them as they were applying for jobs. Now, in order to do that, you need one skill library, and you need one skill library for each of the jobs you're going to recruit for.
Yeah. And Jordi, the people that you work with, the customers and the clients and the organizations you work with, do you think businesses are good at creating skills libraries, or is there quite a mismatch out there?
No, absolutely not. So
I really need you to be honest, Jordi.
So they are how do you call it, tempted by the technology vendors a lot, because every technology vendor comes with their own skills library. I see a lot of combinations of clients who have Eightfold, Workday, and Degreed, for example. It's 3 areas: the talent, the core HRS, and learning. Top-notch systems. We want to purchase the best of the market, and then what? And each of these platforms comes with their own skills taxonomy, their skills library, their own proficiency levels. There is no real standard. And then they ask, okay, what do I need? Do I choose Workday or do I choose Eightfold? If I choose one, what happens with the other? How can we make sure that the skills data is, traveling around to different platforms that everybody sees the same profile in the same system? So that is one of the key fundamental challenges the clients I work with currently face because of the offering of the various taxonomies. And I think what you did on Vodafone is a very rigid answer to that situation, to really say, okay, no, this is our fixed skills library, and that's it, and that's what we're going to work with, and we will make sure that is everywhere in the systems, and we don't get tempted by the 2 billion other skills floating around.
Can you see more organizations following Vodafone and becoming more rigid and just saying this is what we're going to use?
I think most are still in the journey of taking a decision towards that. So I think there's some kind of a hybrid way where we can say, yeah, we want to leverage the skills taxonomies from certain systems, but this also has to do with the openness of the technology vendors, because like you mentioned, it's a proprietary data. So they are not very open to receive or send out to other vendors or systems, because of course then it has become a bit of a risk. So that's also I think everybody's searching that, the vendors also, but the companies themselves also. So hopefully there's also something called a job architecture, where it's a mandatory thing from an HRIS perspective. A lot of companies have the ambition to make the job architecture skills based, and then you ask, okay, how can we let the technology help us in doing so? So then you would leverage, let's say, existing skills taxonomies from platforms like Eightfold to flow back into your job architecture. So there is no golden egg in this. So I see some clients who are still on the royal way. I want to create all the different profiles myself, and others say, okay, we flip the switch and we just let it go and let the employees, manage the profiles and pick it up from there.
Okay. And this session is also looking at how we manage and develop those skills as well that already exist within the business. Sometimes when an employee hears that there's some kind of work being done to figure out what they're good at and what they're not good at, that can feel quite threatening, and especially because technology is moving so fast. It can feel like, from an employee perspective, or my employer is trying to catch me out a bit and trying to figure out what I don't know. how can we encourage employees to be part of this journey and contribute positively rather than them seeing it as tech destroying everyone's jobs?
Well, it's an interesting way to look at it, because I think most employees actually see this as a great opportunity. Most employees are looking for great ways to their employer to build their skills, to build their careers, to enable a career for everybody, as Eightfold has as their mission, for example. So I think if you do it right, it's going to be the thing that enables your employees to grow and be better at whatever they want to be. It's a really interesting question to flip it on its head and say, empowering the employees to go into the direction that we know there's a place for them in the future, and give them the tools and the resources and the empowerment and the information on what are these jobs of the future, what are the skills of the future, and how can you get there. So help them to establish these career pathways, but put it into their hands.
Yes.
Guide them through it, not completely hands off, right? You don't say, oh, it's your own, like you go have at it and we don't have anything to do with it, but also not telling them you must go in a different direction. Because I tell you now, like we're working with a lot of healthcare companies, for example, and being a nurse is not for everybody, right? If you tell the receptionist your job is going to go away, you go be a nurse, people might say, well, I can't see the blood or whatever, right? So if you try to force people into a direction that they don't want to go, they're just going to quit. So they're just going to leave you. So helping tap into this adaptability that everybody has and giving them the support systems and the information, and then helping them grow with your company, that's what everybody wants to do.
Yeah, of course. And ideally, that's what every employer and employee relationship looks like.
Exactly.
Francesco, have you witnessed any kind of pushback in dealing with your talent management and training and development, etc.? You know, some people might have worked at Vodafone for the 20 years and think I'm doing quite a good job, actually.
I think it's a bit like a combination of push and pull.
Yes.
Right. So I think there is a big pull. Like for example, during the pandemic, we had to close all of our retail shops, and clearly there was a pull to reskill and retrain these people to do other things, because we made a point out of not making anyone redundant at that stage. So clearly there was a pull there. Now, in other instances, instead, as you're saying, you have to push people a little bit out of their comfort zone. You know, so you need to find hard. I always tell the team, you know, we need to find soft and engaging ways to get people to be motivated to reskill themselves. So, for example, we do like on a quarterly basis, we give 1 free day to all employees to focus on learning. So that's 1 day which they can just, and more organizations are doing that. But on the other hand, I'm also saying to the team, look, we need to find ways to put hard wires to hardcore processes to really push people to do training, to do skills. Like, for example, I don't know, for our customer care population, you know, things like if you don't do your reskilling, if you don't do your training well, if there is a restructuring, you don't qualify to be redeployed, for example. You know, stuff like that. Because at some point, it can become a little bit easy, you know, to stay where you are and just wait for someone else doing what instead you should do. You know, so I think it's really a combination, and it has to be a combination of positively engaging people and creating for them the space and the time, which is sometimes very scarce in organizations. You know, to really focus on learning, and on the other hand, finding some hardcore processes, I would say, HR processes that really make indispensable, they take action from an employee perspective. You know, like really this concept of skills and reskilling is part of your core job duties. You know, it's not something that is not a benefit, it's not a commodity, it's not like, it's part of your job description. As part of your job description, you also have to learn.
Oh yeah, that's a really nice way to look at it. It's not an extension or it's not an added bonus. It's fundamental
Correct.
to your job. Jordi, are you seeing things like that with your clients? Do you see much of a pushback?
No, I think from I like the push and the pull thing, because that's also what I use. In general, there is quite a pull from the talent themselves that they want to develop, right? So the pull is there, but I think on the other end, the restraint is that there is the opportunities to really develop are not very sufficient, and that has to do with culture, also with line management way of thinking. I've saw many talent marketplace or talent mobility, not per se the technology, but telemobility initiatives failing because hiring managers were not posting any development opportunities. So they are not having the mindset of what do I need to create to have talent develop themselves. I see currently a lot of pull on, let's say, mentoring and coaching, was also mentioned in one of the earlier panel sessions, as a way to develop. So, and what we still see from the technology, from the market, from learning, is about consuming content, which is, I don't think, really learning. And that's a pity, but because that is not the pool the employees will have. The pool is not about, oh, I want to consume learning for whatever hours a week. No, I want to see opportunities with mentoring, coaching, other projects, doing part-time stuff somewhere else, to really look into other things to develop myself. And I think that latter part is where still many organizations are struggling in getting that thoroughly organized and offering everybody offering sufficient opportunities for development in that category.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point in terms of the fairness, in terms of who gets the opportunity to develop, because it's hard to treat everyone in that company the same all of the time. So right. How do managers, line managers, the exec board, how do they decide who gets to boost their skills that day? Everyone's busy, everyone's got a big agenda.
Well, I think there's some interesting examples that I can mention. One company that we interviewed and we found out, they're called DCP Midstream. It's an American pipeline company in the oil and gas kind of sector. And they found out that their people had broader skill sets. They are fixing these pipelines, very technical stuff. And usually they had people that were very specialized on certain fixes and certain machines or something like that. So when something broke down in one plant, they had to fly them over or transport them over, and customers had to wait for hours or days or something like that. So their CEO said, I'd rather have higher paid people with broader skill sets. And the HR team really took that to heart. And they have now a way that they pay every employee, their hourly paid employees, they pay them, $1.25 more per hour if you accumulate additional skills. So you don't even have to take another job. You just accumulate more skills because they say, well, now we have people cross-trained. If something happens, we don't have to ship that other engineer from another plant or something like that. And it helped them, their people, develop broader skill sets, but it also helped their customers, of course, get better service. And for them, eventually, although they pay more, they have better business results because their customers are happier and
greater
things don't take so long.
etc.
So you can really tangible things to do around rewarding for the skills with actual money. And people, of course, took it to heart, and they all lined up for it. And they said, well, anybody could do accumulate those skills, and you get paid more per hour. Very tangible way to do that. Obviously, rewarding and recognizing for what you want people to do is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Francesco, you're nodding along there.
Yeah, I think this is the hardwiring, hardwiring skills with some of the core basic HR processes. Also, we do some of the same things. So, for example, for people working in product development, so agile teams and so on, we do reward them in a different way depending on the level of what we call applied skills. Now, for us, applied skills means not only you master a skill, but you're also able to deploy that skill in a good way. Because one thing is something, and then another thing is something and you're actually able to do something with it. For us, that's the important thing. So for people who get to the 4 and 5 in the assessment of the skill, we do have a different reward scale. Now, we are thinking to apply this more broadly to the entire organization. So how do we bring this more broadly to all employees? Linking skill assessment with performance management and with performance development. So at some point, our performance management system will become, assessing achievement on objectives, but also assessment, let's say, proficiency on skills. And at that point, then we will link probably some reward or remuneration, let's say, implication to the level of assessment. So it is clearly reward and remuneration is one of the core, if you like, drivers, when you look at the levers that you want to pull in an organization in order to accelerate, let's say, development on that part.
Okay, very interesting. Now, when we're using AI to make these decisions sometimes, we talk a lot about the ethics around AI and biases potentially being introduced in any part of that section. And the government are introducing a AI strategy over the next year or so in the UK. Now, I wonder what experience do you guys have with working with AI and what are the kind of pitfalls? And I can just imagine some business leaders thinking, okay, it sounds good. Everyone says it's the future. Eightfold are obviously really involved in it, but how is it going to work for me? And what about all these scary things that people think about when it's science fiction or whatever? Kathy, how does AI best work for developing skills?
Well, it's interesting because we had some great presentation before on AI and legal things and all of that and mitigating biases. So I think we heard a lot of great content on that already. But I think one thing that for me was very interesting when I first heard about it is this concept of algorithmic bias. So I'm like, what is that even, right? And it is basically that AI can either mitigate bias much better than any person can, or it can like replicate bias much faster and much more efficiently than any person can. So I think just being aware of it, looking at the data that you feed into the AI, obviously, because your data in itself could be biased. If you tell the system all your greatest candidates are 30-year-old man, white man from Stanford, the system is going to look for a 30-year-old man in Stanford.
Yeah,
mostly,
and it
right?
might draw a parallel with, oh, they have skills in this area, this area, this area. Therefore, that's what our organization
That's exactly
needs.
right. And so looking at the data and then also looking at like bringing the human people in to actually check what comes out there, because I think the AI works best when it's AI plus the person. Right?
Yeah.
So you shouldn't ever say, oh, the system made the decision, it's not mine. Because in the end of the day, when you're the head of HR in a company, you're accountable for the people decisions that happen in your company. So you can't just say, oh, well, not up, like I have no accountability for that.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. Just bringing the human together with the AI is really, really important.
And Jordi, what about your clients? Are they embracing of AI? Do they welcome the technology and it helping skills development, or are they still a little bit cautious?
Most of them are still a little bit scared. This might not be the right word, but they're not want to hand over. Like you said, Kathy, like you mentioned, it's not about the AI makes it a decision on this one goes out and this one goes in. And I also saw examples where people are smart, so they after a few months they see also what the AI is doing and how they can alternate with tweaks in their profile to come up higher in certain rankings or so. So that's also what's going on. So we have to be careful that we don't position the AI as a solution which will, we will never have to take care of it anymore. So it's always, I think, the human component. And we also see AI every day making, stupid recommendations, right? So basically,
I think you see humans doing that as well.
Humans doing that
Well,
also.
that's it.
But AI is also, so if you then say, but the AI, this is how it now works. So it is also how you present it towards the organization, where, I think we have to be a bit careful is not the right word, but not too much of, oh, this is everything, this is it, and the new future looks like everything this, So maybe a bit more, how to call it, different. Keep the human aspect and the technology aspect next to each other instead of after each other.
Yeah, there's not a priority. They're both kind of equal. Francesco, how is Vodafone using AI in its skills development?
Well, look, we have made a big investment on that because we believe that there is a lot of value there. I completely agree that especially when you start the journey, it's probably even more important to be super conservative in the way you do things to avoid that there are concern incidents and so on. What I think is good is that the level of alert in the system is super high. So what I find is both internally in the organization, legal teams and so on, and externally, works councils, unions and so on, they're all super sensitive, which I think is good because it keeps you very, let's say, awake on the topic. I think there is a lot of education to be done, to the point that was made in the presentation before. I think there is a lot that we need to explain to demystify a little bit AI, because people don't realize how much AI is already in their lives. And we're trying to implement some of the things we want to do with AI on skills in Germany, for example. So we're spending a lot of time with the works councils there, where we have co-determination. And their question is, now that you have this data, someone from the corporate center will be able to decide whether, the machine will decide in the corporate center whether this person is getting promoted or not. And as well, I wish I was capable of doing that, so there is a lot of fear against the topic, which I think we really need to work through. Probably it's one of the skills we have to build, both internally and externally, and working together, probably, different companies to really build a social responsible way to do AI. Now, the first part is super important, and we take pride of what we do, both with customers and with employees. We don't do silly things at the expenses of probably going a little bit slower than we could. But yeah, there is huge potential there. I was chatting to the team. Look, simply by switching the recruiting engine into a more sophisticated AI machine, we had positions which have been open for 4 months, which we have been able to fill in 4 days.
Wow.
So that's the acceleration that you get, simply because you get much more focused, let's say, recommendations, matching profiles, and so on and so forth. So that's the potential that is there. Clearly, with that comes a lot of attention and focus on making it in the right way without compromising on, the ethics standards, I would say.
That's very interesting, and I pick up on a point you've made in terms of companies working with potentially even their competitors or other ones in different markets. Jordi, do you see that happening at the moment? Do you see people sharing knowledge with other organizations, or is it very much this is what we've learned and this is what we're going to keep hold of?
I would say yes. It opens up more. Everything becomes more transparent, although still it still is for the person itself. So it is, and organizations among themselves is also limited. You see industry initiatives where they say, "Hey, I was working in the banking industry where they had an initiative to do the telemobility across banks, right? So in the Netherlands, we only have, let's say, 4 big banks, 3 big banks, and some other banks. So it is fairly, condensed. Where they wanted to do the telemobility part across, and then you have exchange of talent, and you can leverage, and other people can also sniff around. It's also, own benefit to see, okay, if they can sniff in a controlled way, they won't leave because we will let them also explore other stuff. So that's what you see happening, although it not on a large scale. So it is relatively small initiatives because everybody is still a bit
closed in, a bit wary,
protected on their talent.
Kathy?
I think I agree with you. I think it's just starting. We're doing a big project together with Eightfold. We call that the Global Workforce Intelligence Project, and we do that by industry, where we bring different CHROs, C-level executives from an industry together to actually see what, holistically speaking, not for yourself, but for the industry, for banking, for example, what are the skills of the future in general? What are the roles of the future? What are the organizational solutions to that of the future? And people actually love it. People love sharing and hearing from others.
Lovely.
So I think there's a real appetite for it to be very industry specific, because the skills that you need in the future in banking are very different than the skills you need in pharmaceuticals for the future, right? Because your R&D people in the life sciences are going to be different people than your, crypto people. Right? So I think the industry focus is really key. And I think another interesting story I have to share is just looking even outside of your industry too. So when we talked with a healthcare organization, a very large one, over 100,000 people in the US, they have a huge nursing shortage. Everybody has in the US. And so they said, we can't get enough nurses. And so what they're doing is a partnership actually with Amazon, where Amazon pays for the education of their warehouse workers whose job is going to go away because machine is going to eventually carry all this stuff, right? And they are developing nurses. So people say, well, always wanted to be a nurse, and Amazon gives them this career pathways.
that's
And
incredible.
they're partnering with them, so Amazon doesn't have to lay all these people off because they paid for their education, and the healthcare organization gets the nurses, right? So, and of course, for the individual, it's incredibly powerful because you were this lowly paid, like dead-end job as a warehouse worker. Now you're going to be a nurse.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's a great example of responsible business as well.
Exactly, exactly. And
Social mobility, etc.
Exactly, like a three-way win, right?
Yeah.
The employee wins, and both companies win too. So
For
I think
sure.
this ecosystem approach to break open these boundaries and say, where's there an overflow of people, basically, they might be out of a job, and where's the real need for people with other very different skills, and how can we bring these two together?
Yeah,
So.
perfect. Now, we've got just over 6 minutes left. Does anyone from the audience want to ask any questions? Anyone? I couldn't see either way because it's so bright.
Come on,
Could be putting your hand up, I had no idea. Here we go, gentleman in the front.
This is for Jordi. Where did you get your shoes?
We're doing the fashion walk later.
What about my
I'll connect with you on it's a bit of a secret.
Artificial intelligence.
I feel sorry for everyone at home who can't see the shoes. They're fantastic. They're brilliant shoes. Okay, I'm going to ask the panel another question then. So we talked about a lot about what skills we should embracing. What should we be leaving behind? What, if you had a magic wand, would you walk into organizations and say, you don't need this anymore? Who are going to land on the spot first? I'll go Francesco first.
Well, but for us, it's quite clear. It's quite clear. But it's always difficult. Number one, because what you leave behind, most of the times, is what is making you successful, right? So you cannot simply leave things behind, and but you do have to do that at some point. In our case, lots of the jobs, especially in customer service, are getting really transformed, right? So digital is completely transforming them. So if we had the magic, clearly we would transform probably the world of customer service, retail, and customer care into something completely different and more evolved, like in a very short period of time. Of course, we can't. And we want to bring people with us, because these are the people that have made us successful in the last year. So we want to bring them with us, and we are conscious that it's going to take a lot of time and quite a huge investment. And the industry approach, I think, would help. That's what we're trying to achieve. It's not easy, and we're trying to push a little bit the boundaries, but the industry approach would really help, because there are organizations that still need those skills in other parts of the world, in other sectors, in other industries.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
So an industry approach would really help to make that transition without having the magic.
Yeah. And what about you, Jordi? What do you think we should leave behind?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a skill you really leave behind, because
Everything is learning.
No, it is, yeah, of course, but it's also about shifting focus,
Okay.
right? So today it might not be the customer service might not be that of a focus anymore, but over time it might come back, but or in a different way. So you see, now change management has to stay. Of course, it's not something we have to get rid of. But you see the change management contents behind the skill changing. So it's different than it was 3 years ago. And with that, there was a new skill from the Jos Burson. It was change agility, right? So you see then the name is changing. Maybe that's a solution for you. Just rename it. No, but
right.
Yeah. No, so that's what. I think the population will solve that itself, because it will no longer be the focus skill we see in the profiles from the employees or from the job profile. So these things will go away by nature, because simply there is less demand, or there is no demand and supply for a change. If there's no demand for a change, of course the supply also has to stop. So this balance between demand and supply of change will always have to be in balance. So if we get over supply, what happens with the demand? And then it will go back into a different balance.
I love the supply and demand that you mentioned, that because when we studied healthcare, and I think we'll see the same thing in other industries too. We saw there's actually 3 ways that you can solve for the supply side, and 1 way you solve for the demand side. So supply side, you can recruit people, you can retain people, you can reskill people, and on the demand side, you can actually redesign work itself.
Okay.
And about 50% of the efficiency of the problem to solve comes from the redesign the work itself. And I think that's the most untapped area where you actually say, for example, in nursing, we found out that nurses only operate 30% of the time on what healthcare calls at the top of license, which means they do nursing stuff. Most of the
Wow.
time they do something else. They do
Yeah.
like check out people, they update charts, things that you don't need a nurse to do that, right? So how can you help redesign the work itself so nurses can actually operate 100% or close to 100% of the time at the top of their capabilities? And I think that's where the huge value comes in. And you can't do the redesign without any data on what skills do people have and what skills do they need. So that's where the skills data really comes in.
Yeah, absolutely right. We've got less than 2 minutes. I'm going to ask. Oh, we've got a question. Here we go. Have we got a mic? Run, we've only got a minute and a half.
Question more, which is more of a research question for Josh Bertin colleagues. So is there anything we learn from the research about how managers could perhaps help the workforce adapt and create more of the pull for the learning as opposed to the push?
It's so interesting because we found out that people are actually hugely adaptable, which I think maybe it doesn't come as a surprise in the pandemic, but individuals are incredibly adaptable. We as people adapted very quickly. And what we found out, one technology that you never have to push on your employees is a talent marketplace. So regardless of what technology you use for that, I know Eightfold has a great one, people love to go to the talent marketplace. So there's always the supply side that's missing, so you don't have enough projects, but people want to have more. If you think about the learning, not training courses, as we talked about too, but how can you develop those skills in the flow of work, on projects, on initiatives, with mentors, with coaches, those kind of things. You never have to push them to it because they all long for it. So every company we talk with that has a talent marketplace, they say we can't keep people out of it. We can't keep the shelf stocked enough. So we don't have enough projects. We have all these people that want to work on all these projects, but we need to get more projects in. And I think Jordi mentioned that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think if you give them the right way of learning and engaging, people will absolutely come.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. Now that finishes us off nicely. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel for chatting with us this afternoon.